Thank you, Minister, for taking this commencement matter this morning, and formally and officially welcome back. We're here to talk about antisocial behaviour and an increase in knife crime in urban communities. And from the outset, I want to pay my respects to the family of Aaron Keating in Ongar, who tragically was a victim to knife crime last week. And there are no excuses for the taking of a life in these circumstances. The impact of an assault of this nature in a community is enormous, and it brings the concerns about public safety and community safety to the fore. And I think it's justified and necessary that we do everything that we can to protect people from something like this happening again. And so I hope we can have a frank and honest conversation about that this morning. I know that you know better than anybody else the impact of the closure of Templemore on Garda recruitment, and that you're investing in a high-profile campaign to recruit 1,000 Gardaí with a rolling intake. But Garda visibility is the #1 concern that people have following this incident. Community Gardaí are prioritising incidents and call-outs in communities, and therefore they have less time for a steady Garda presence on our main streets and in areas of footfall. And I want to thank them for the job that they are doing. I looked at the Garda report for Blanche in May that covered 2022. And it says that numbers for possession of an offensive weapon are down 53%, with 27, takes versus 57. And the detection rate in searches does remain high at 67%. But I wonder if the Gardaí have the same time for this kind of intervention post-COVID. Having spoken to the superintendent yesterday in our district, it seems public order and assaults have decreased in Ongar recently, but I know myself that the perception people have, they can see drug dealing happening in the village. They can see the damage that is being done from antisocial behaviour, and they do see large numbers of teenagers hanging around the area, but that doesn't always mean that they're up to no good. The Oireachtas Parliamentary Budget Office tells us that we have 291 Gardaí for every 100,000 inhabitants. And when you look across Europe, that wouldn't be top of the list. When we look at areas like Ongar, where there has been such an increase in housing developments, which is a good thing, they're not seeing a comparative increase in Garda numbers, and therefore they are feeling that lack of visibility. The issue of a new Garda station in Ongar is now back on the agenda, and which I would fully support, but at the same time it does depend on resources. There's no point in having a building if you don't have the increased resources to run it and be present in the community. In relation to youth work, there is an active youth work culture in the area and service. There's a youth cafe on a Thursday nights in Fibblestown, a suburb programme for teenagers. We have a youth diversion project, and we've seen the recent positive results of those projects with an 80 to 98% success rate, but lower if drugs are involved. But I know from talking to youth workers in the area that they feel that education and awareness is a big issue, that carrying knives is happening, and that young people don't realise the implications and the consequences. And I do feel that targeted support works, but you do need to back that up with universal youth work in general. Thank you.
And Tara.
Thank you, and indeed thank you, Senator, for raising this really important issue. And I too want to pass on my condolences to Aaron Keating's family, but to anybody who's been impacted by knife crime. It's devastating for any kind of death, but when somebody is murdered in this way, I think it has a rippling effect throughout the entire community. It's important to note, and I think you've touched on this yourself, that for the most part Ireland is a very safe country, and if you look at us in comparison terms to other jurisdictions and similar jurisdictions, our crime rates are quite low. And you mentioned the fact that evidence shows assaults are down. That's right across the country, and there's a lot of crime statistics that show that particular types of crimes are down. Confiscations when it comes to knives are up. In saying that, I am very conscious, looking in particular across the water, looking the way in which knife crime, certain gangs of youths and the direction that it's gone in the UK, I'm really, really conscious that that doesn't take hold and that doesn't happen here. And I think often the concern when it comes to knife crime is that this is a weapon that's readily available. You know, people talk about having an amnesty or trying to take knives out of the system, but when you have a weapon that's in your kitchen in every single home in every single across the country, it is a challenge that we need to deal with. By way of education and making sure that the Gardaí have their resources, but that young people at a very early age are educated to know that this is not the route that they should go down. We need to have a comprehensive, robust and legal framework in place with respect to knife crime, making sure that there are heavy penalties for those who then do take that path and who do engage the maximum penalty. In the Firearms Offensive Weapons Act for conviction for possessing a knife in a public place without good reason or lawful authority was increased from 1 to 5 years. So that's simply just possessing a knife. You can get 5 years in prison, which is quite a severe penalty, but I think it's right. We're increasing the maximum sentence for assault causing harm from 5 to 10 years as well. Again, I think this is right, where you harm someone at the moment. If they make a full recovery, by the time you add up the various different measures that have to be taken into place, somebody might serve very little time for what is a very serious crime. It's not classified in the crime statistics which are compiled by An Garda Síochána. That's because they may be used in different types of offences, so threats, intimidation, robbery, theft, serious assault and murder as well. So as a result, because of that, there are no quick fix solutions that we can necessarily point to, but if we look at long-term evidence-based strategies, that is what we need to try and tackle this as part of a wider antisocial behaviour response, looking at street violence, looking at youth offending, looking at domestic violence, where unfortunately knives are what are used in the vast majority of homicides inside the home. I'm absolutely committed to all of this, bringing all of this together, be it specific to knife crime, looking at antisocial behaviour, looking at youth justice interventions, looking at education, and of course looking at how we can support the Gardaí. So you mentioned Garda numbers. I think it's frustrating for everybody that we had started to get into a good flow of numbers coming out of Templemore after it being closed for so many years. COVID hit and that obviously put a stop and the numbers began to slow down again. We're now getting to a situation after 2 very successful recruitment campaigns where the numbers are increasing every intake. We now have a next intake on the 31st of July. We'll have a following intake in October, and that will continue as long as it needs to get all of the numbers up. I know in the area that you've mentioned, there has been an increase in Garda numbers. It's gone from 688 to 706 in recent years. Obviously, we'd like to see that number much higher because, as you've rightly said, it's the Gardaí who aren't chasing from scene to scene or going from one incident to the next. It's the Gardaí who can be on the ground in the community, linking in with young people, talking to them, getting to know them. That's often what is the biggest deterrent in these instances and which really kind of help a community come together. So that is my number one priority. I met with the Garda Commissioner just this week on Garda numbers, making sure that we have Gardaí on the street, trying to deal with the issues that you've just mentioned. That is my priority and it will continue to be.
Senator Curry.
Thank you very much, Minister. One issue that has come up in the last few days is the investigation time for knife crime. I believe that it is only 24 hours as opposed to a week if there was a firearm involved. And the Gardaí have said to me that that would be something that might help. But I'm also interested in the work that is happening in relation to the community safety partnerships and your expert forum on antisocial behaviour and the subgroup on knife crime and what the next steps are. I'm looking to places like Scotland that treat violence and knife crime like a public health issue, looking at the underlying issues. And I don't believe that we are in that same space. But this is, for me, about early intervention and prevention. And at the moment, knife crime is increasing. It has increased 78% over 7 years, although I know we've got better at detecting it. But in 2018, 16% of people who were responsible for were suspected offenders of knife crimes were under 18. And I think you rightly are making sure that this is on the agenda.
Thank you.
So what is coming next with the community safety partnerships? Thank you.
Just to touch on a few things, so in relation to the length of time that the Gardaí can hold, that's actually going to change now in relation to knife crime and the criminal miscellaneous bill that we have coming through the Houses and that I hope will be enacted before the summer recess. You mentioned the expert forum on antisocial behaviour, so a piece of work that's been done through the forum is actually looking at other jurisdictions, Scotland being one of them, because I know they engage a huge amount with the hospitals, they look at the data, the statistics, and then feeds into the policy that they do. So that work is ongoing at the moment to try and inform what we're doing. Again, coming back to the preventative piece, the Youth Justice Strategy saw an increase of about €6 million last year. It's now at about 24. That means we can expand on the youth diversion programmes. It means we can invest more in more communities. This year alone, I think we have 4 new programmes that are being developed. So there's investment happening, there's research underway, there's obviously a strong criminal justice response in terms of the penalties there, and then obviously our Garda numbers, trying to increase them. I think all of this collectively is the way that we can respond. But finally, on your last point, making sure that communities own what's happening in their communities. So we have 3 pilot programmes of our community safety partnerships. We have Drogheda and a number of other areas where similar projects are underway, and this will now roll out into communities in the next few years, making sure that not just the guards, but our health services, our educational services, our community members, everybody has a say in setting a plan as to what keeps them safe in their own area.
Thank you. And can I just say to the Minister, thank you.